And you know, I've kind of fallen into this with working with autistic or ADHD kids that are diagnosed ADHD, then later diagnosed autistic spectrum. That's kind of how it started, and then trying to help these guys. And what's interesting is the ADHD kids are behind, 75% are behind socially, so are the autistic spectrum kids. And so I started getting more and more kids on the spectrum along with my ADHD kids in our social skills groups. So we have social skills groups, we have camps. People come all over the world now because a lot of our information's online. And so people are coming in. We had somebody from Saudi Arabia come in this year for 6 weeks, came to the camps, and then we helped him as well. Had tremendous results with him. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. So that's why I do this, is, you know, I started working with ADHD kids because my dad had ADHD, never was diagnosed, and became a self-made millionaire, and then filed bankruptcy and had 4 different marriages. My brother has ADHD as well, and but with the right love and support, he's a great dad, he's a great father, he's a great leader, and he's doing great things today. And he also helps kids as well in Argentina and in Portugal. He's been in Portugal for 15 years. So it's really neat to see, you know, the support my dad didn't have versus the support he had, and how he was successful today. And of course, then that led me to helping these kids that are diagnosed ADHD that later get diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorder. So we're going to talk about celebrities with autistic spectrum. We're going to talk about what is ASD, or autistic spectrum. It's interesting, you know, when they used to call it Asperger's, whenever I would diagnose a kid Asperger's that's autistic spectrum, it was actually kind of humorous, because it wasn't humorous actually at the time. I was a little shocked when one of them stormed out of the room when I said, well, you have Asperger's. He goes, and we're like, where are you going? You just called me an Asperger. I'm like, oh, okay. Really sorry about that. Well, let me try to explain this to you. It's really hard to explain that. So I was kind of glad they changed it, but I didn't really like how they changed it, because now when you see you have autistic spectrum, they think of the low functioning kids, because we used to call autism, you know, the low functioning kids, you know, with low IQ and that won't ever be independent, and we're calling them the same thing. So that's even more difficult sometimes to explain. But we're going to talk about some home behavioral interventions, school, as well as teaching social skills, and alternative treatments as well. So here's some famous people with autistic spectrum. Susan Boyle, the amazing singer who really surprised us on a reality show with her voice. You know, she got up there and you just look at her. She wasn't like all dressed up. She just got up there without really taking, you know, without looking at hygiene or any of those things, not to insult her. But then you find out later she has autistic spectrum or Asperger's, and you go, okay, that makes sense. That's why they're not really she's not that concerned about those things. American Idol, also another singer, has Asperger's and Tourette's, and his way of coping with the music. It's a great way to drown out other sounds that might annoy an autistic spectrum kid, like chewing sounds, you know, if you're at dinner or things like that. Daryl Hannah has publicly acknowledged her autism diagnosis as a child. Now, I didn't see that one. I didn't see her as being autistic spectrum. You have Dan Aykroyd. That makes complete sense. If you guys know, remember Coneheads? Remember the Coneheads? Very rigid, very literal, and very robotic in their movements. It was perfect. And even Ghostbusters, he obsessed over ghosts, and of course then it caused all these nightmares. And he started, you know, visualizing these ghosts. And then he also loved Law and Order. He liked policemen, so somehow he actually combined those two things to come up with the movie, the blockbuster Ghostbusters. And of course they tried to duplicate that recently, and you know, I don't think you can top Dan Aykroyd. So that was pretty cool. America's Next Top Model, Heather Kuzmich, she refused to let her diagnosis hold her back. You have Dan Harmon, who has a diagnosis as well. Miss Montana. And then you also have Temple Grandin, who was diagnosed. And I know that's not a big surprise to you guys as well. Okay, what is autistic spectrum? Social communication, social interaction issues, problems with reciprocity, with back and forth conversation. Somebody might say hi to them and they just keep on walking. They may not say anything. Hi, Jim, and then just keep going. Not even say, hi, Fred, back, or hi, David, or hi, Tiffany. Doesn't reciprocate that. And even if they do, and they go, how was your day? Fine. They won't say, how was your day? So that's one of the things we have to keep working on with social skills, is teaching them how to have that back and forth conversation. Deficits in nonverbal communication. They have trouble reading people's body language. And so that's a big challenge for them. And a lot of that's because they have bad eye contact. Just with eye contact, that can help them to see people's body language and see the nonverbals. They have problems developing and maintaining relationships. Maybe they make friends with someone, but then all they want to talk about is what they want to talk about. All they want to do is what they want to do. So I know at our camps, what I've done over the years is I've given silly bands to kids, when silly bands was popular, just for participating for 5 minutes in an event. And then the next year, it was, you'll get to win pieces to a Lego set. Maybe it was Star Wars Legos each day, or for each activity that you participate in entirely. And then the third year, he's doing all the events. The fourth year, he shows up. This is at my camp. He shows up at my camp. I'm just thinking of one boy in particular, that he shows up at our camp, which is a YMCA camp, and we just throw 20 kids that stick out a little bit at this camp into a normal camp. So it's a mainstream camp, and we throw them in, and they stick out with the hopes of helping them blend in by the end of the week. So the fourth year, he shows up, him and actually another kid who's been working with me for, at that point, 3 years. He was 4. He shows up, and they're in line, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have you guys signed up for my camp. Oh no, we're here for the regular Y camp. We want to see how he'll do without you this time. And I'm like, that's awesome. I'm like, that's amazing. That's great. That's our goal. And he's, I think this last summer with his 7th summer going there, I think 3 or 4 years he's been without us. And I remember the camp director, the last one that just resigned about 2 years ago, he said, do you remember Alex, Jim? I go, yeah, I remember Alex. He goes, we changed his life, didn't we? And I said, yeah, we did. And I was just so excited about that the mom stayed the course and that we were able to do that. And then I found research later where we find that kids drop off the autistic spectrum. And I'm going to share a little bit of that with you as well. And if you met Alex, you would never think he has it now. You would never think that. We have restricted repetitive patterns of behavior or interest. They'll maybe obsess over Pokemon and obsess and learn everything about it and get the books on it and know every character, every strength, every characteristic of each character, and have all the cards and get in fights with their parents because they can't get another pack of cards and they've got to have that pack of cards. Or somebody stole my cards and they just can't do anything else until they find that card. So they get really obsessed and focused on that, and then they might switch to something else, maybe Yu-Gi-Oh! And some adults still obsess over Pokemon that are on the autistic spectrum, which really makes it tough for them to interact with people their age because they get stuck. They get stuck on those things. Do you know why they like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh? Do you know why they like that and anime? Have you ever noticed, if you ever hear a kid that obsesses over anime, I would start looking at the criteria for autistic spectrum. Not that all kids that like it, but just the reason they like it. I had a guy who was 40 years old. He found out at 25 he had autistic spectrum, but his parents knew since he was 8. And he came in my office to get an autistic spectrum diagnosis so he can get venture capital money to do games on his iPad, to create them and sell them and to make tons of money. He's like, yeah, I need VC dollars. I'm an ASD, he says. He says, I just need the diagnosis so I can get venture capital people to give me money. They want to give money to these people that have autistic spectrum. That's one of the positives of that. But he was 40 years old and didn't find out until he was 25. He was so mad at his parents that they didn't tell him. He's like, I knew something was different. I knew something was wrong. And they didn't tell him. It's almost like finding out you're adopted at 25. We know now to tell people from birth and keep letting them know and telling them so every different developmental stage they go through, they know it was adopted and how beautiful adoption is and what a gift that child is. So lining up toys, the insistence on sameness. If you change, they need routine, but if you change it, you really need to let them know ahead of time that there might be a change and start teaching them how to handle change. Rigid thinking, very literal, highly restricted fixated interest. I had a guy, I remember one of the first kids on the spectrum I worked with, he told me something really cool, and I can't remember what it was, but I said, get out of town. And he says, go to hell. I was like, what? Why? What did I say? He says, dude, I'm 13 years old. How am I going to get a job? How am I going to make money? How am I going to eat? Where am I going to live? He was so mad at me. So we got to be careful how we talk to these guys, but they also need to learn the difference between literal versus figurative language. Preoccupation with unusual objects, hyper-reactivity. Those are the ones I see the most, but then there's the ones that are very just kind of laid back and just don't care. Doesn't want any friends, just let life happen. Very lack assertion. And then there's the ones that are very reactive and get bullied a lot because they react to teasing. Because they take everything that people say and they look at it literally. When they say that they're gay, they actually say, I'm not gay, I'm not homosexual. They don't process that the kid's teasing them or trying to get them upset. Symptoms must be present early developmental period. Usually, it's interesting, one of the pediatricians here in town, he can actually see autistic spectrum around 2 to 3 months. He can actually pick it up that early. So, having a good developmental pediatrician, they can start to see those things. Just no eye contact, very little sensory reaction. They don't react to very much sensory when they're really young like that. Okay, so here's the severity levels. There's 3 severity levels of autistic spectrum. Level 3, I don't really work with level 3 because they need more than outpatient. Most of what we do, all of what we do is outpatient. Other than the summer camp, it's not really a residential program. It is an overnight camp. But we just, these guys need a lot of support, and they will the rest of their life in most cases. They can't have intelligible conversations, rarely interact. They might have, some body movements, involuntary movements, very sensitive to sounds, could overreact to stimulus and sensory. Level 2, they need a little bit less support, maybe an assisted living program where they could have a job but come back and be taken care of. A lot of these people are living with their parents now, but until they pass away, and the parents, we encourage them to set up a trust with an attorney to, so that they can have a plan for whenever they do pass on. And then you have level 1. So I work with mostly, some level 2. I kind of find, we call it autistic spectrum, so you kind of have kids that are between 1 and 2, and it's neat to see them move to a 1. And then there's some kids that move off the spectrum, and those are usually the level 1 kids. And those are usually the kids, too, that are diagnosed in the first 30 months, I believe, is what the research is telling us. Here's the research on autistic spectrum, how many kids have it. So since 2010, we're seeing 1 in 68. It was 1 in 88. Some people think it could be pesticides, could be measles, mumps, rubella, or something, I'll share that with you as well. But it might also be that we're doing a better job educating and getting people involved. As we started talking about autistic spectrum, I think we started getting more people. The Asperger's diagnosis criteria was very rigid, which is kind of interesting. It was very rigid. It was really tough to meet that criteria. So I think there was a lot of people not getting services because of that. So that led to people talking about high-functioning autism, autistic spectrum, and then they made it official in May of 2013. So I think that may be part of that as well. It's pretty much in all socioeconomic, racial, and ethnic groups. It's about 4.5 times more common among boys than girls. Studies in Asia, Europe, and North America have identified individuals with autistic spectrum with an average prevalence between 1 and 2% as well. So the numbers are the same in these other regions that they've tested for them. Parents who have a child with autistic spectrum have 2% to 18% chance of having a second child. That's because there's multiple studies. And so they're somewhere in there, it's around 8 or 9%. And then that's kind of what I see. When I see kids on the spectrum, every now and then I will see 2 kids. Almost half are identified with average to above average intellectual ability. Now, when it was Asperger's, you had a much higher ratio of kids with high intelligence because those were the ones that were high functioning. So now that they have autistic spectrum and everybody's kind of in that same group, but on a scale, the ones that are, there's about half of those kids are average to high functioning. Possible causes, we just talked a little bit about that. leaky gut, and digestive issues, and I'm going to share that research in just a minute. And the pesticides, a lot of those pesticides, they've linked as well. And vaccinations, question mark, because there's so much back and forth on that. It's really hard to pinpoint that as well. Leaky gut, so we're going to talk about leaky gut. I'm starting here because, as you will see in the research, this is actually the biggest thing that we can do for these kids. I've seen kids that we've done this where we've healed their gut, and a lot of the symptoms go away. And you just have a few things left. We have some patterns and we have some routines. And again, this is level 1, and this is early intervention. The boy Alex I was telling you about, we did that. We helped heal his gut. We also helped him with the social skills, and we did parent coaching as well. But it was a 3-year process in doing that. Arizona State University, this was just released in March of this year, 2016, performed research with fecal samples of children with and without autism. They found participants with autism had fewer types of good bacteria in their gut, which could be reason as to why the stomach is more prone to digestive causing pathogens. So they're basically saying the kids that are having digestive issues, and it's usually in the first 2 years. Here's the California Institute of Technology, where they had mice injected with the flu vaccine, or with the actual flu virus during pregnancy, and that actually caused some issues with them to developing leaky gut, which is basically where there is toxins being leaked into the bloodstream, and of course also seen in human children with autism as well. When treated with probiotics and analyzed 5 weeks later, the mice with the stomach condition improved, and they began to resemble healthy mice with less anxiety, because most of the kids on the spectrum have anxiety. That's part of why they obsess, and also have sensory issues. And they began to resemble healthy socialization as well, and less engagement in repetitive behavior. So interesting that mice actually have socialization skills as well. So they actually saw them being they're isolating less and doing better socializing with the other mice. Although there are differing estimates across the board, some studies have included that up to 90%, this is big right here, up to 90% of children with autism suffer from stomach issues, and it's usually the first 2 years. Well, why is that important? What's the only thing we eat the first year? Milk. What if you got a milk problem? What if you have a milk allergy? Or you have trouble digesting that? Or you don't have the right enzymes? For some reason, you don't have the digestive enzymes that the other kids have, or you don't have that good bacteria. So the kids that are getting milk, if they're having trouble digesting it, how about kids with acid reflux? Oh yeah, he had reflux. I'm telling you, just about every kid I talk to that has autistic spectrum symptoms, they had digestive issues the first 2 years. And it's not hard to figure out, if it was the first year, what it caused it, because the first year is mainly milk. It could be breastfeeding too. I mean, you've heard of kids having trouble with breastfeeding, and they had to switch to something else, like a no fussy formula or something like that. Or they have and they were getting constipated, or they're having the runs. This is what we're finding with these kids. So we're asking that question with every kid that's on the spectrum. We're asking those questions, and in most cases, we're finding that as a problem. Well, why is that important? Where do our brain transmitters come from? Do you know there was a study that found that 95% of our serotonin, which is the neurotransmitter for anxiety and depression, is not found in our brain? It's only 5% in our brain. The other 95%, where do you think it is? It's in your stomach. Well, what if you're not eating foods that gives you serotonin, which is tryptophan? Tryptophan gives us 5-HTP, then that converts to serotonin, and then serotonin converts to melatonin to help us sleep. So these kids are having trouble sleeping too. And it converts to B3, which helps with our nervous system, helps with our sensory, and also helps with digestive enzymes to help us digest that food. So it's pretty amazing. What gives us tryptophan? We all know turkey does. Everybody thinks it makes you tired. Well, it only makes you tired when you combine potatoes with that and pumpkin pie. So sugar and tryptophan, that will definitely knock you out while you're watching the turkey bowl after Thanksgiving. These kids, if they're not eating right, or they're having digestive problems and their gut's inflamed, they're not going to get the brain transmitters from their food that they need. Because our brain transmitters come from what we put in our gut. And if they're eating tons of carbs and things, as I'll share with you later, it causes these issues.